Okay, so this video will look at Yeats's poem An Irish Airman Foresees His Death. In one of Yeats's last letters he wrote, "When I try to pull all into a phrase, I say, man can embody truth, but he cannot know it. The abstract is not life, and everywhere draws out its contradictions." And I think this poem epitomizes that sentiment that Yeats proclaims in that statement. In many ways, Yeats is very contradictory. He's often referred to as a late romantic visionary, but he's also an astringent modern skeptic. He's an Irish patriot and an irreverent anti-nationalist. He's a visionary, as I said before, but with this vision, he's also a shrewd man of action, whilst also being an esoteric dreamer. And the poem, I think, is infused with this real-world situation of World War I, an Irish airman being shot down, who we'll talk about in a moment, but it's also imbued with this Yeatsian ideology. There's also some references in this poem to Yeats's interest in rejuvenating Irish culture, whilst also hybridising Irish and English traditions. But at the core of this poem is really an abstract, fairly complex concept of looking at the theme of life and death, mortality, the purpose of existence. Contextually, we can see that the poem is based on Lady Gregory, who was Yeats's close friend and benefactor. Her son, in the middle there, Robert Gregory, who is the Irish airman whom Yeats is referring to in this poem. And in many ways, the poem is a memorial of Robert Gregory, who was shot down in World War I. And this dramatic monologue is told from the perspective of the Irish airman, based on the movements before his death in the sky. Now, Robert Gregory was a volunteer and also friends with Yeats. And through this commemoration, he's really idealising Yeats's action and looking at his purpose in volunteering for this war, because as we know, Robert Gregory is from a very good family. He was an aristocrat, so for what reason would he need to go and enlist himself into the battle? So now that we've looked at that literary context, I think it's also important to be aware that Yeats disliked war poetry in general. So let's have a look then at what he's trying to do in this poem. Firstly, the musicality of the poem is very important, and this is another word for this is prosody. The poem incorporates iambic tetrameter, so we can see here that it's an unstressed followed by a stressed syllable, and this is called iambic, unstressed followed by stressed. So the first line would be, "I know that I shall meet my fate," and this rhythm continues throughout the entire poem, giving it quite a lyrical quality. And we often find also some examples of some monosymbolic words. So in that opening line, every single word is a single syllable. And this is called end-stopped line, where we can hear the meter and the rhythm of the poem, and this creates an important effect. So what is that effect and what is that purpose? Well, ultimately, the rhyming scheme, the A-B, and the four quatrains forming the structure of this poem creates symmetry and adds to a tone of certainty. But it also picks up on a key idea that we're going to look at in a moment, which is that of balance. So the structural balance of this poem echoes the poise of the airman. And you can almost imagine him up there in the skies, floating around. And that action is mimicked through the words and the meter of this poem, because Yeats is essentially admiring the art of flying and, almost the escapism of that action, which we can also see balanced through the airman's state of mind as he actually foresees his death. So in some way he's quite prophetic. Because we know Gregory's not a passive victim, but he's more of a hero imbued with foresight and control. So looking closely at the first two stanzas, we can see some of this context coming alive. "I know that I shall meet my fate, somewhere among the clouds above. Those that I fight I do not hate, those that I guard I do not love. So he's referring to, of course, the British here, whom he is fighting for as an Irishman, that he doesn't love them. That's not the reason why he's fighting, and he's not fighting as a motivation of hatred towards the Germans. We hear his response in the second quatrain. My country is Kiltartan Cross, my countrymen Kiltartan's poor. No likely end could bring them loss, or leave them happier than before. So where is Kiltartan in the scheme of things? Because that's quite important in the scheme, the understanding what the poem's essentially about. You can see here where Yeats is writing from in Galway, Ireland. Let's zoom in a little bit and have a closer look at where Kiltartan is on the map. So here's Galway up in the north. Kiltartan is a very small county located southeast of Galway. So it's a fairly nondescript, you might almost say insignificant area, but of course for our speaker in the poem, it is everything that he lives for and fights for are these people, which is really interesting because Robert Gregory was a man of the land. He was an aristocrat, so why would he be identifying himself with the poor? Well, let's have a look in this next slide. Ireland, of course, was at a cusp in its period of freedom, really, moving away from the English. And you can see in this top left picture, we serve neither king nor Kaiser, but Ireland. And I think that message is very strong in this poem. So, you know, Robert Gregory is really, he's a patriot and he's a nationalist, but he's also, as Yeats was, a man of the people, and he felt that this affinity with the land and with the village was something worth fighting and worth dying for. And this comes alive in the third and fourth quatrain. We have this anaphora of the nor being repeated. Nor law nor duty bade me fight, nor public man nor cheering crowds, a lonely impulse of delight drove to this tumult in the clouds. And this is followed by the use of a caesura, which is breaks in the line. And we're going to have a look at why Yeats breaks up these different lines with the comma in the opening line of the fourth quatrain and the final line of the fourth quatrain. But he also has this quite brilliant alliteration which emphasises the balance and the affinity that I suppose the reader has with the airman and his plight in the skies. I balanced all, brought all to mind. So what is he balancing? Well, let's find out. The years to come seemed waste of breath, a waste of breath, the years behind in balance with this life, this death. And again, we have caesura in the breaking those two lines apart. So looking closely at these words and the ideas in this last stanza, we can see that there's what is called a chiasmus, which is where an idea is introduced and is then followed up in a later part of the sentence or the line itself. And this quatrain is one long sentence, and there's actually three chiasmus in this quatrain. So this is a uniquely triple chiasmus. So let's look at the three here. We have I balanced, then echoed later at the end of the poem with in balance. The years to come we have echoed later with the years behind, and in the middle the waste of breath is then mimicked with a waste of breath the years behind. So this action of the biplane flying in the sky is also a metaphor, a very rich metaphor for the tenuous balance that human life is really anchored on, often between despair and hope. That's where the human condition often lingers. It's not really a state of bliss or understanding of the world around us. It's more of a questioning and a longing for certainty. And I think that's really what Yeats is celebrating through Robert Gregory's actions here. And the chiasmus emphasizes that very strongly through those the triad of repeated ideas. So if you'd like to have a closer look at some resources, I would highly recommend the following links, particularly the second link, which has a brilliant analysis from a range of experts on the poem. And the third link is a really insightful analysis by an English teacher who deconstructs the poem line by line and